Hello, I'm John Shavacco, the co-chair of the NY-GEO 2023 conference and a board member of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization. I'd like to welcome you to this recording of a live presentation from the conference, a two-day event which was held in Albany, New York on April 26th and 27th of 2023. This year's educational sessions and keynotes represent the latest in ground source heat pump system design, product innovations, and installation practices, along with important policy, regulatory, financing, and incentive updates. This presentation is one of over 40 sessions from the two-day event, all of which were recorded and available at NY-GEO's website, www.ny-geo.org, along with session descriptions and a link to download the slides from each of the sessions presented. NY-GEO is proud to make this content available to our members and other industry stakeholders, and if you are a member, thanks so much for your support and participation. If you find this content valuable and for some odd reason you are not yet a member, consider joining NY-GEO at the appropriate membership level with details available at our website. The live recording from the NY-GEO 2023 conference will start in just a moment. Thanks so much for listening.
I am going to have Lisa Marshall come up for New Yorkers from Clean Power, who to talk about some of the advocacy stuff at this point. And then that will be followed by our dinner program.
Thank you, Zach. I'm really relieved to have this green ribbon on my name tag showing that I am a member of NY-GEO. I'm very proud to be a member of NY-GEO. So I'm Lisa Marshall. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Organizing at New Yorkers for Clean Power. One of the most important parts of my job is I help to coordinate an amazing statewide campaign called the Renewable Heat Now campaign here in New York. As we sit here just a few miles down the road, our state legislators are hotly debating the climate laws that are going to impact deeply this industry. We are on the verge of passing the very first in the whole United States all-electric code for new construction in the New York State budget. That has not happened by accident. There are there's millions of dollars being spent to defeat our climate law and our climate policies in New York. Unbelievable opposition to the transition off of fossil fuels that we all know we must make. And the only reason we are where we are today, that's supporting this industry with the thermal energy networks, the stronger building codes, the all-electric code, and the other efforts that we're undertaking is because of the tireless advocacy of our grassroots organizations here in New York and that have moved the needle significantly. So I would love everybody to give a hand to all those organizations. Many of them are here. And the way that organizations have this impact is by building power. And that the way you build power is by engaging the community to take action. And so tonight, we are going to take action together. Each of you has on your table a little slip that looks like this. And would you just do me a favor and hold them up for a minute? And I'm going to take a selfie. All right, hold on. All right, ready? Hold them up. Hold them up high. All right. Okay. So on this little slip of paper is a QR code, and if you are over 50, like me, you might be a little scared of a QR code, but all you do is take your phone and turn the camera on and aim it at that code, and it will, and then touch the picture, and it will take you to our Take Action page on our website. Or if that's just too terrifying for you, which I understand, you can type in this bit.ly /NY-GEO. That has to be all caps. It is case sensitive. So I'd like you to just take out all your phones, take them out, put your fork down, put your fork down, put your knife down, put your spoon down, take out your phones, and take this slip of paper, and everybody send this email to Governor Hochul and the legislature to take action on the pieces of legislation that we are advocating for to support the geothermal industry to transform New York's power sector. To transform New York's heating. Is everybody doing it? I don't see you all doing it. Are we doing it? You don't have to live in New York to take this action. Please help us out. All right. So once you're done, listen up, and I'm going to leave. I'm getting kicked off the podium here. Once you have sent that email, you are not done. Please text this action to one other person, your wife, your daughter, your son, your best friend, your neighbor, your aunt, and ask them to take the action too. Thank you so much. And I'm leaving. That wasn't like that.
All right, so it turns out that we've done such a good job of everyone following instructions that it's rate limiting the website. So at some point during dinner today, why don't we have you guys complete the link and then send it to all your friends. And with that, we have Jack DiEnna coming up to give a few welcoming remarks.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone here. This is a spectacular conference. It's really interesting to see how many young people are here. And I'm 77, so anyone younger than me is a young person. But having said that, I want to recognize my fellow ambassador, Dan Ellis. There's 4 of us that are still living. All the other ambassadors are geothermal. So when you get that, let me know. I also want to recognize, we have heat here. Of course, you've all seen that great organization. I understand we have an organization called Wings. Well, there's a new organization in town, folks. It's called Senior Members Urging Utilization of GEO, or SMUG. You have to be over 50, which is about half the room. You can also belong to the gray-haired group, the gray edge group, because all those guys are older. And you have to have fun, okay? If you're not having fun, leave. If you don't find this interesting, leave. But I'll tell you what, if you're young and in this industry, you're going to be as old as I am still here, okay? So with that, I'd like to say one other thing. Jens, I'm sorry to do this, but I have to break this. He told me in confidence, but I really do have to break this to you. His real name's Jerry, and he's from the Bronx. I'm sorry, Jens. You told me not to say anything, but so he's Jerry from the Bronx from now on, okay? And with that, I'm going to call up my compadre, Jeff. I'm glad you pointed to that, John. It's like I said I was 77, right? I forgot it from here to there. Jeff, our illustrious leader in IGSHPA. Jeff, the executive director of IGSHPA. You're on, Jeff. And I'm off.
Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update on IGSHPA. What a great conference this is. Before I get started, I do have to ask one request. I need a little help with the plan here. Somehow we need to figure out a kidnapping scheme for Christine, John, JR, Zach, Jens, Bill, and all the other NY-GEO board members and volunteers. I'd like for all those individuals to come back to Illinois if they could and work on the IGSHPA conference with me. So I appreciate any help there. What an honor to be here. This really sets the tone for the industry, and it's just great to be part of this. So with that, I'll give you a little bit of an update of where we are with IGSHPA. Last year, we talked about rebuilding the organization, transferring the organization from Oklahoma State to a separate 501c6 trade organization. And I mentioned that I'd been with the organization about 6 months. We were working on sustainability, making sure that the organization was going to stick around long term. This year, I'm happy to announce we are financially stable. We have some reserves to cover unexpected costs, and we're continuing to move forward. We have nearly 2.5 times the number of business and corporate members this year that we did last year. So so thank you very much for supporting IGSHPA. That really makes a huge difference. We're actively conducting training sessions. In fact, the first week of this month, we had actually 2 at the same time on both coasts. So we're spreading out, which is a great thing. Christine Hoffer is going to talk a little bit later on about the MOU between NY-GEO and IGSHPA. We signed that earlier in the year, so NY-GEO is a member of IGSHPA, and IGSHPA is a member of NY-GEO. It's a great collaboration, and we will continue to work together on furthering the industry. So that's great news. Staff-wise, I'm happy to announce we have 3 employees now. We just hired a 3rd in February, so we're starting to gear up, and we're about ready to bring on another one. So we're in the process of continuing to work on our training curriculum, and we're going to bring on an expert in developing training. So any input we have from NY-GEO members would certainly be helpful. In other news, we are adding 2 new board members to the IGSHPA Board of Directors this fall. There's a new manufacturer sector and a utility sector. So if you know of any good candidates, let us know. That'll bring our board to 7 members, and we'll continue to further our work with IGSHPA. And then the last update is on the IGSHPA standards. If you're used to the 2017 standards, those will be sunset at the end of the year. And we're going forward with the binational ANSI CSA IGSHPA C448 standards. So that's going to help tremendously with consistency and provide one standard for the industry. So we're excited about that. And lastly, I have to put in a pitch for our conference. We're aspiring to have this kind of attendance, certainly. We're going to be back in Vegas this year. We're partnering again with the National Groundwater Association, and it's December 5th through the 7th. So we hope to see you there. We have some joint sessions this year with NGWA. One of them is on the NGWA building retrofit in Columbus, Ohio. They're converting that building to geothermal. And so we have a joint session to talk about that conversion. We also have some driller topics that will be joint sessions, and we're looking at a couple of others. So hope to see you in Vegas, and thank you for the opportunity to provide an IGSHPA update, and thanks for your support of IGSHPA and the industry. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Dougherty with GEO-Exchange. Thanks, Jeff. It is such an honor to work with Jeff Hammond every day, and IGSHPA and GEO-Exchange have never been closer together. We're aligned in purpose and mission now, and it's really great to see how we empower one another in the work that we do. So I have been doing this for a while. I spoke last year at dinner, but wow, what a difference a year makes. This is absolutely incredible. I'm stunned at not only the turnout, but the energy in the rooms, the topics. We're having a moment, that's for sure. So for those of you that were not here last year, let me just kind of get you up to speed with what I talked about really quickly. Who remembers Build Back Better? Because that's what we were all talking about last year. And we were trying to figure out, you know, like what Kristen Sinema's attire of the day might mean for the reconciliation prospects, or what the Senate parliamentarian was going to do, or you know, what side of the bed that Joe Manchin was going to wake up on. And in mid-July, he woke up on the wrong side of the bed and said, "That's it, I'm done, reconciliation is over, and I'm walking away because it's going to cost too much money and it's going to cause rampant inflation." I went to Washington a week or two later, and I had my hat in hand. We were begging for some small incentive of some sort, just a little extension, please. And by the way, can you bump the ITC to 30% for parity with solar? Everyone was non-committal. There, you know, the budget deal is coming up. We were just asking for some small extension in the budget, and nobody would really tell us one way or another. I got back from Washington, And one of our lobbyists said, "You're never going to believe this. There's this thing, the Inflation Reduction Act." Wow, that's quite a name. It apparently addresses Manchin's concern. It was all a ploy. I mean, this was some trickery that they used to get the CHIPS and Science Bill through. They announced the IRA shortly thereafter, and then just a week or so later, it had passed and was enacted. And the world has changed in many ways. I mean, you hear a lot about how this is the biggest climate bill, not only in America's history, but really in the world's history. And I think the IRA has done a lot in terms of injecting energy and certainty. It gives us over a decade of tax certainty. But it wasn't organic. You know, Lisa Marshall said just a moment ago that these things don't happen by accident. We have been working toward this moment for a very long time. And it really, in many ways, it began in 2016, 2017, when we were looking at losing the credits, and then we did lose the federal tax credits. Well, over that 2-year period, we built so many relationships in Washington because we had to. We had a few champions. We had disparate individuals like Bernie Sanders and Jim Inhofe, who's now out of the Senate, but you'll recall James Inhofe brought a snowball to the Senate floor to disprove global warming. He was a big GEO champion, and we liked having him, but we broadened that stable of heroes for geothermal, and they're still with us to this day. Is our work done in Washington? Absolutely not. There are a lot of implementation issues ongoing. They just came out with guidance on energy communities. Next up is guidance on domestic content, and shortly thereafter will be direct pay provisions. Everybody wants to know how nonprofit entities are going to get funds for their geothermal system. We should know in just the next couple months. GEO-Exchange is involved in a lot of other work centered around third-party ownership, around what constitutes a megawatt of net thermal energy, and we'll continue to keep pushing the needle in Washington and around the country. I think the states is obviously where a lot of action is going to be, and I often talk to people in other states and refer to New York and the work that has been accomplished here. What you have done in New York was also no happy accident. It involved tireless efforts on the part of NY-GEO, its board members who went to Albany. I remember in 2015 where nobody in Albany really knew what geothermal was. And thanks to folks like Jens and Zach and Bill and so many others who were just tireless, they now know in Albany the power and potential of geothermal. So I have some breaking news. Just about an hour ago, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Limit, Save, and Grow Act very narrowly. It was actually New York's own George Santos who cast the deciding vote. This is not a joke. This just happened. And this legislation would repeal all of the IRA's provisions that are supporting this clean energy revolution. I'm not trying to scare everyone to death, but because there's no chance that this will ever take effect and become law, it's an opening gambit on the debt ceiling negotiations, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out over the next few months. Mark my words, President Biden will never come to any negotiating table where any IRA provisions are on it, are up for cuts. There may be other programs, other spending that is on the chopping block, but IRA is not going to be one of them. However, depending on what happens next year in the election, they could bring this back around. So we need to be prepared, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll be in Washington again in a couple months, laying the groundwork to defend our credits, to distinguish ourselves from other technologies, and to make sure that what we've got now stays until 2035. I want to thank Chavaco and so many others here tonight. It's really, really great to be here, and I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to say a few words. Tomorrow, we're going to do a much longer session on the IRA, all of the great provisions in it, so I urge you to come to the plenary. But I want to next introduce one of our board members. We couldn't do this without the support of the gold sponsors, 2 of whom are GEO Exchange board members. We could not do this without our board, who have been great supporters of the work that we do. So I want to bring up Titian Burris from ClimateMaster to say a few words.
Thank you, Ryan. That was great. You couldn't have said it any better. One thing I do want to do is I want to change this up a little bit. I'm going to take a picture of all of you because I am really just amazed. I came to this conference a long time ago, kind of when it first started, and I'm just blown away by how many people are here. The New York GEO, the board of directors, John and Zach, and all the others have done an incredible job. We have a new executive officer that I met today. I think she's going to do incredible things. I think that leadership is going to be incredible for you all. Christine, I don't know where you're at. You're somewhere in here, but I wanted to just say, hey, thank you. Okay? That's awesome. I mean, that is moving the big wheels. We're moving this train, and it's awesome to see that. NYSERDA, the support that you've given to make this happen has been incredible. And then the other thing is, more importantly, I've been doing this for a long time, and without the contractors, the installing contractors, all of you that are here today, give yourselves a pat on the back. Really. And I want to say the old and the new, because there's a lot of people in here that have been doing this for a long time, far before we had federal tax credits. I mean, these are people that really kind of help pave the way. We call them Geo Junkies. Thank you all. Appreciate that. The other thing is the engineers, the design engineers that are in here, the architects, the builders, the developers. I mean, you all are the people that are going to help us bring this thing to scale and where it needs to be. Just a quick rundown about ClimateMaster. We've been doing this since 1957. We have the longest tenure in the water source heat pump, ground source heat pump business. That's what we do. Under our umbrella, the Climate Control Group, we employ about 900 people, most of them which are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. We're very proud of that. We are very good at planned large-scale communities. That's something that we've done for a long time. We actually are involved right now in the largest planned development in North America called Norton Commons. And that is the largest multi-use private single-family home development, and that's right outside of Louisville, Kentucky, of all places. So that's a development that's going on right now. We're very proud of that. Another thing that we do that we really believe in is the people that can't necessarily afford geothermal, but they need it the most. So one thing that we really are heavily involved in is Habitat for Humanity in Oklahoma City. We've installed close to 1,000 units in Habitat for Humanity homes. We donate most of that. Dan Ellis over here started that. Thank you, Dan. So that's a big thing. I mean, those are the people that really need it. They're tight, you know what I mean? And so we're really proud of that. And then another thing that we're really proud of, and it was interesting that the first presentation today was One Java. Okay, that's something that ClimateMaster has been involved with. That's one of our projects, and we're really excited to see that go right there in Brooklyn. I mean, to see a big geothermal project like that in Brooklyn is incredible. So good job to all those that were involved. The other thing is a lot of people don't understand about ClimateMaster is we're the pioneers of the water loop system, the water source heat pump water loop system. And that goes way back to the 60s. So we've been involved in this a long time. I mean, and there's other things, single pipe, commercial geothermal design, but we're here for you. We have a lot of different, we have a large breadth and depth of products, so we can do just about any type of application. I always say that there's no application that we cannot apply geothermal to. One other thing I do want to mention, there are so many people in this industry that have paved the way, and I do want to give them some recognition. Am I good? Am I getting long? Okay. Ryan, Doug, GEO Exchange, thank you. Dan Ellis, he's one of our pioneers. Dave Hatherton, Bob Brown, Michael Albertson, the Albertson family. You guys have paved the way for us to get where we're at right now. It's absolutely incredible. But I'll leave it at that. I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, New York GEO, NYSERDA, and everybody that's been involved. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everybody. The first New York GEO conference I came to was 2017. That's when I started in this industry. The energy and the mood in 2017 and the number of participants was slightly different than what we experience today. I've only been in the industry for 6 years. Jack reminded me this morning that I looked about 2 inches shorter. If I stay in the industry for another 25, I'll be about Jack's height. When there's a gathering of people with positive energy that are committed to a path of change for good, you want to be a part of that. That's why we're privileged to be a sponsor of this conference that has continued to grow. You want to be a part of that change for good. And I would ask all of you to say, why are you here? You may look at me and say, yeah, we kind of understand why WaterFurnace is here. You guys are selling equipment. Yes, that's true. But being part of something bigger than just the business aspect of it, when you feel like you're implementing change for good, I would ask each of you to ask the question, why am I here? What did I get out of today? What did I learn new? What paradigm shift did I have? If you're committed to reducing the reliance on fossil fuels as the only path or the predominant path to generate heat, I think you're in the right place. If you're interested in improving the resiliency of the power grid as the world and our country and our society and the state of New York embark on an energy transformation that's been 125 years plus in the making. I don't know if society has ever gone through this significant of an energy transformation with the amount of infrastructure that's already in place. And how do we convert that in a practical and realistic way? If you're interested in resiliency on the grid, I think you're in the right place. And if you're interested and motivated to find a better way to decarb our society, I think you're in the right place. Find the why of what you do differently when you leave here tomorrow afternoon. The most encouraging thing for me sitting through the sessions today was, after only 6 years, I would come to these sessions in the past, and the people that were presenting, I knew most of them. They were the pioneers, the people in the industry that have built this industry, and Titian named some of them, and there's many more. Today, there was a lot of people presenting that were talking our language and talking our technology on how to utilize simultaneous heating and cooling loads, how to recycle heat, how to get heat out of the ground and out of surface water and not combust anything, and how to optimize the design and the envelope of the building to make sure that you're putting in the most prudent design cost that you can. These are people that I don't know. That's pretty exciting. That means there's new people coming to this positive energy change for good. And that's a big, big plus. I'm going to shamelessly take a minute to recognize, and if I could have Dan Ellis and Dave Hatherton and Bob Brown please stand. I was reminded this morning that I knew it was this year, but I was reminded this morning that WaterFurnace was founded in April of 1983. So this month we celebrate our 40th year. And Dave and Dan were the founders with a vision that you ought to be able to get heat out of the ground to heat your house. And there was people that went before them, but they built something special in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And according to Bob, they never would have been successful without Bob doing the design work a few years after that. So I just wanted to shamelessly recognize them as one of many of the groups of pioneers that have built this industry for us. So I'll leave you with this. A guy by the name of Einstein said, "We can't solve the problems of today with the same thinking that we used when we created those problems. We have to think differently. We have to think boldly. We have to be committed to the change for good." I think that's what this organization represents. I think that's what the energy in all the breakout rooms was exhibiting throughout the day when I attended multiple different sessions. I wish I could have attended more. And I look forward to what new things that I'm going to learn tomorrow as we wrap up a great conference. So thanks to all the presenters. It takes a lot of effort and time to put together your story of how you moderate a group or what you want to present on your latest project. Thanks to the NY-GEO team. And it's clear that there's a bit of an epicenter for geothermal and the endorsement of the technology here in the state of New York. So thanks to the state of New York and all the people that have driven things forward on the change for good here in the state. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to bring up Christine Hoffer, the Executive Director.
So I'm new, brand new, 9 months. Don't know what the hell I'm doing. But it's great. I think this organization is amazing. And before I go into all this, you have to know that the board of this organization is committed and dedicated and works their rear ends off. So thank them, because they are the ones that are driving all the activity that is happening, and there's a lot happening right now, and I'm very excited about it, and I appreciate them and the support that we have from all the other groups that we work with. Yeah, it worked. So NYSERDA, thank you. We just entered into a contract to work with them. They're committed to supporting NY-GEO and moving the needle forward. Growing membership is extremely important. We keep talking about membership and why it's important. If you do not have that green ribbon, let's get that green ribbon on you. We need to be a sustainable organization in order to do the things that we do to move the needle forward in New York State with geothermal, advocating, educating, and making sure that the people that don't know what they don't know, that they get to know what they don't know. And we need your membership to do that. We need your voice to help us do that in that education of them. Workforce development. We're not going to be able to meet our climate goals unless we have more people doing what we need to do to put those boreholes in the ground and put that geothermal in the buildings. So we're going to work very closely with them to work on workforce development and grow the industry with the people that we need to put in geothermal. And that's a bit of education, that's a bit of workforce development, and that's a bit of collaboration just to make our industry grow, and we need that to happen. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the next few years and working with you guys and moving that needle forward. So Jeff alluded to a little bit of us working together. So when I first started, I don't know anything. I honestly don't know anything. So I connected with Jeff, and I said, yeah, could you help me out a little bit? So we've been meeting about twice a month to talk about things. So we entered into this MOU. And basically what that's going to do is that our message is going to be essentially the same message. So when we're speaking geothermal, we're talking the same talk, and we're walking the same walk, so that we can grow the industry not just in New York State, but across the United States, and beyond. At this conference, we have 4 countries and 24 states at the New York Geothermal Conference. That's pretty amazing. So working with groups like IGSHPA, we can continue to grow our conference, and we can help Jeff grow his conference. So you, I guess, all should sign up. We'll get you a QR code later with that. And then working. So Jeff has education programs that we'd like to get back into that. We have a new website, and hopefully we have a platform now that will allow for us to do that. I was going to show the website, but I'm not. NY-GEO.org, that's our website. There's a link at the top that says join now, so you can become a member pretty easily just right on that. But the back end is great. There's an opportunity for you guys to come together and network with each other. There's an opportunity for us to be able to share your message through a newsletter, which is not just in, which is an amazing thing that Bill Nowak does. But this is more about you have something that's going on, you want to share that with everybody. You send it to us, we look it over, we push enter, and boom, it goes out to everybody. And resources and things like that. But the website is really meant for you. It's meant for you as members to engage with each other, engage with outside organizations and consumers. So with the new website, it is brand new, so we want the positive feedback and how we can make it better. So make sure you tell us about that. And I don't think I mentioned this, but you should probably become a member because we need you. We need your voice, we need your support, and we need you in order to grow what it is that we're doing in New York State. And that's putting more geothermal in more buildings throughout the entire state. That's all I have, John. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. And actually, one more thing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
You should bring Bill up.
Okay. So sponsors, exhibitors, thank you. This conference could not happen without you. Your financial support, your commitment to us and to this industry is evident, and we appreciate it very, very much. So I've gotten a little bit too much credit for what's going on here. So there's 2 ladies over here, Desiree and Kathy. Those 2 right there made this thing happen. So thank you so, so much. They truly stepped in and made it happen. I really, really appreciate you so, so very, very much. So thank you.
So I have, for the last few years, given up what's new since we were last together talk at these events. This is a picture of you all last year, April 28th. And I'm going to go through several different categories. I've got about 15 minutes. That's not enough time to go in depth into what's happened, so it's going to be pretty quick, I think, for most of the time. But one of the most important things that has happened this last year is the 6th assessment report from the International Panel on Climate Change. And there are a lot of good reasons why geothermal is important. You know, it's the most comfortable technology. It is very efficient. It is economical and can really save people a lot of money in a lot of circumstances. But the reason it's being paid so much attention to and being supported so heavily at this point is because we are in a climate crisis, and geothermal provides a solution. The IPCC report is very intense. I recommend you look at the summary for policymakers. It's a relatively short document, but it's got some really good information, and it is very sobering. We have a limited opportunity to fix things, folks. This is my favorite document or graphic that was in that report. And let's see if this does. Yes, it does work, but I can't quite see where it is. But basically, this is when I grew up. This is from 1950 to 1970. Very mild, very consistent, very livable climate. And I want to ask you, how many of you are parents of a toddler, are expecting a child, or are grandparents of a toddler or expecting a child? Raise your hand. A lot of you. Congratulations, it's a great thing. I hope it works out really well for you. But you can see here, I'm not kidding. But that grandchild or that child is going to be in a much different world. So basically, the bottom row is where I am at this point, and it's where they are as well. And they are starting out in a world where the climate is no longer stable. And it's going to get worse no matter what we do at this point. We can get it so it turns around eventually. But if we all do really spectacular work and get things very low, and it's not going to be easy, and we're nowhere near online to do that, there is still going to be a very serious increase in the global temperature, increase in the instability of the climate. But we are not headed to very low yet. New York came out with a scoping plan. If that is followed to the letter really well, New York might be in the very low category. We need to bring the rest of the world along with us. But really, where we're headed at this point is somewhere between intermediate, high, and very high. It's going to take a lot to turn things around. And if you can see in the small gray letters to the side there, basically those top three categories are going to keep going after 2100. That doesn't break the momentum. So very serious. This is my favorite quote that came out of that report. We are walking when we should be sprinting. And as you look at solutions and hear about things that are proposed, you need to think, are we walking? Are we slow walking? Are we making it harder to walk? Are we starting to jog, or are we actually sprinting? We really need to think that way about solutions moving forward. It's going to be difficult. We are going to be disrupting folks' normal patterns, folks' heating systems that they've had for 20 or 30 years in their houses. This is something that's going to take a lot of thought and a lot of movement on their part, and we need to help make that happen. So I mentioned the scoping plan. For a couple years after the New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, there was a body called the Climate Action Council that sat together and listened to advisory panels and came up with a number of recommendations for moving forward and getting to New York's goals that include a reduction of 40% by 2030 in greenhouse gases and 85% by 2050. The scoping plan came out in December. So the building section is the one that I paid most attention to, and I think the one that would be of most interest to you. But it talks about heat pumps becoming the majority of new purchases for space and water heating by 2030, 1 to 2 million households electrified by then, and heat pumps being a very prominent force in the commercial space. And by 2050, 85% of homes have to be electrified. These recommendations were worked up, over a long period of time with a great deal of thought and a great deal of data backing them up. And folks looked at ways to kind of back off them, make them a little easier, but we don't get to 40% by 2030 unless we do these things. We don't get to 85% by 2050. So these are the recommendations, particularly in relation to new buildings that came out. And why is this continuing to move? So by 2025, new residential constructions, 3 stories or less, needs to be fossil fuel combustion equipment free. So no more burning things by the beginning of 2015. 2028, that extends to larger buildings, and then in an even stronger measure, really, when you think about it, this is people's homes. After 2030, if you replace your system at the end of its useful life, it's not like you have to do it in 2030, but it will be fossil fuel combustion-free equipment. And then by 2035, the same for commercial buildings. So there are precedents. This is happening some places. And New York City, the population center of our state, actually passed something like this that starts in 2024 for new buildings in New York City and for larger buildings in 2027. So most of the state is already covered by this. That's the part of the state that has experienced the most severe climate instability. The rest of the state needs to catch up. There are over 100 communities in the United States who have passed legislation basically electrifying buildings in their communities. Beacon, New York was number 101. And I want you to know that the gentleman, the third from the right, is J.R. Rath, our Director of Operations. He gave the initial testimony at the hearing for that bill. So at this point, there is very intense work going on and negotiations happening relative to the state budget. And these negotiations involve the central aspects of the recommendations from the Climate Action Council. Two of the most important are the All Electric Building Act, which, you know, there is some back and forth at this point as to whether it's going to start taking place in 2025 or 2026, whether there's going to be loopholes, how extensive those loopholes might be. So that's an important act. One of the other important acts is the HEAT Act. We really need to look very carefully at how we're going to transition off of gas and other fossil fuels, and it's going to be a process that is very complex. It's going to involve the interests of gas utilities, of the customers of gas utilities, and the HEAT Act is a very important piece of legislation that's been put forward that's going to really save billions of dollars for customers. At this point, the way the regulatory framework and the legal framework is set up, gas utilities are basically forced, and they're certainly willing to do it, but they're also forced at this point to invest more and more in gas infrastructure. This bill would turn that around. It would turn it around in a way that saves people a whole lot of money, and it's something that has been worked on very hard by Renewable Heat Now. And while I'm on that subject, Lisa mentioned to me that the website she directed to you had crashed because too many of you had gone on it. So if the other half of you can go on it now, if you didn't get in, it would be great. Okay. Go off the Wi-Fi and it will work. So there's another couple items of importance. One is cap and invest. This is the way that the Climate Action Council came up with for lowering every year the amount of greenhouse gases that are allowed to be emitted in New York State. And, you know, for companies, largely utility companies that go past that, they would need to buy allowances that would then pay for clean energy programs or rebates. These items are all part of the budget negotiations going on, which may end up this week, it may be next week, but it's been a very intense process. One thing that has skipped a lot of people's notice, and it's something that was put in by the New York Senate in the budget, was a tax credit cap increase for geothermal projects. Those of you who were here last year or who have been paying attention know that New York State has a 25% tax credit for geothermal systems capped at $5,000. And this bill would raise that to $10,000 for both geothermal and solar. We are hopeful that this will be part of what results from the budget. We don't know yet if it will. So there's an intense back and forth going on right now. The fossil fuel industry has spent a lot of money. They have paid for robocalls that have scared the daylights out of legislators in New York State, and has tipped a lot of the balance that kind of went into the budget proposals. We are up against forces that are basically fighting for the life of their companies and their way of doing business. Luckily, we also, more than ever, have a really well-united clean energy community. When we started NY-GEO back in 2014 and started trying to work with environmental groups, their focus was all on stopping hydrofracking in New York State. They were all about stopping the supply coming into the state. We kept saying, you got to look at the demand as well. We really need to do something at the end of people heating their homes and really getting something going with that. At this point, the energy of organizations like NYPIRG and the Sierra Club and others is really intensely focused on buildings and on heat pump technology. So that's something that I think we all should be grateful for. This was a rally that was held in January to support clean heating. And then recently there was a very interesting controversy where there was a proposal to change the way New York State accounts for greenhouse gases. It was put forward as part of the budget process. The clean energy movement in New York State united and really put a lot of pressure on to move that back, and within a couple days it had been pulled from the budget negotiations, but we expect that it's going to be part of the legislative session moving forward. So please pay attention. We'll be sending information out about this, and we hope you can help us with it. So other things I'm going to go through a little more quickly in terms of what's happened this last year, but we did have the Inflation Reduction Act, and let's all give Ryan a hand. He was amazing in pushing that through. IGSHPA, I believe this is from the IGSHPA website, has a lot of good information about how the IRA works and how it can benefit you. One of the things that Ryan mentioned was the way it works for commercial tax credits. And this is a map that just came out. Basically, for the longest time, solar tax credits on a commercial level were 30%, and for geothermal it was 10%. And any investor worth their salt would go into the solar credits. With part of the IRA, it got moved to 30%, and then if it's domestically manufactured, and thanks to folks like WaterFurnace and ClimateMaster and Enertech, geothermal heat pumps are domestically manufactured, so we go to 40%. This is a map that takes it to 50%. Any of the colored areas on the map, so the southern tier and various cities in New York State, can get an extra 10% because they are part of communities that have been somewhat marginalized by the transition off fossil fuels. Pennsylvania is going to do very well in this. You can see that, but certainly there are a lot of communities in New York State that will as well. So in the field, there have been some great projects. We heard about one Java today, but Lockport Housing Authority is a great example of low-income housing. Zero Place in New Paltz. You know, we are gathering all across the state using this technology. Beach Green Dunes in Queens, Jackson Homes in the Bronx is now getting their hot water, or will be getting their hot water, from a geothermal system. So there's a lot of good things going on in the field. The Clean Heat program in New York State has been a very major force. Basically, the incentivizing of geothermal was transferred from NYSERDA to the utilities, and there has recently been a Department of Public Service review. Kind of they're in the halfway mark of this process, and they sent out a number of questions that were part of a report, and it'll be interesting to see the way that plays out, the way they take the feedback, and if there are improvements. And then certainly the district heat pump initiative in New York State is starting to take off, and there are a number of district system pilots that have started up and are in the process of being either studied or implemented. So I wanted to salute a couple new people who are active in New York GEO. And this is Christine's first conference, and I think she did a fabulous job in conjunction with other folks. Okay. I also wanted to mention that Foley Hoag has come on a pro bono way with New York GEO and has been helping us out with some legal expertise, and there's some people who have played great roles in New York State's government in the past that are active with them, so they've been a real resource for us. So where to from here? There are challenges in the heat pump industry. Certainly we need to keep quality assurance in all our projects. We all know that, you know, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. Certainly scaling up and training and hiring and investing is going to be a major thing that needs to happen as we move forward. We all know that drilling capacity at this point needs to be strengthened to a great degree. We need to keep affordability And as we look at this, you know, the district systems are one thing that people are looking at, but also heat as a service might come through as part of the IRA's commercial tax credits. So that might be something to keep our eyes on. And we really need to penetrate public consciousness. One of the speakers before me talked about how New York really recognizes at this point, but the person on the street needs to know a lot more, and you need to be an important part of making that happen. And then certainly we'll work on shaping policy. I wanted to mention a few policy issues that remain. One is finishing up, getting the no fossil fuel heating in new builds. The budget's still not done. We don't know how that's going to work. But once it's passed in the budget, if it is, it's going to go to the Codes Council. And it's not a foregone conclusion how the Codes Council is going to grapple with that. We all heard from Jens today about the storage value of ground loops. And that is something, you know, there's a lot of money and a lot of energy being poured into electricity storage. There is a correspondence with thermal storage, and that connection has still not been made in policies that are being put forward. We need to get that in place. We're looking at this tax credit cap going up to 10%. We'd also like, or to $10,000, we'd also like to see that be refundable. So for low and middle income people, it would make geothermal a much more real possibility. We need fair electric prices for GEO customers. At this point, with the type of per kilowatt hour rates that we have and the expensiveness of electricity in many parts of New York State, the prices just don't work, but there are ways of making them work. I could do 10 minutes on that, but I just want to make the point that we need to do that. There is, at this point, if you want gas in your property, if you're within 100 feet or 200 feet in many circumstances of a gas main, all the ratepayers in New York State pays for that to come to your building for free. This is, you know, not equitable in terms of the way geothermal is supported and the way gas is supported. And then certainly a sales tax exemption for geo equipment would be a good thing and would bring us parity with solar. So one takeaway, and I'll be done at this point when I'm done with this, is everybody in this room could play a role by bringing an elected official to a geothermal installation. If you're an installer, you have access to it. If you're a developer, you do. If you're a community member, see your local installer and ask them if you can arrange this, because it's really important that these folks that are making our laws and communicating with their constituency understand what geothermal is. This is a picture of Jens Panagau in February. He's talking to Sean Ryan, the senator seated, to Pat Burke, the assembly member, to Bill Conrad, the assembly member, and to Brian Higgins, the Congress member. And he's in a geothermal project that we're taking a lot of pride in Buffalo. But can I get a show of hands of how many people will make an effort to get your local elected official to a geothermal project over the next year? Great, great. I've memorized you all. I will I will get you next year. So, we are to the keynote speaker, and it is my privilege tonight to introduce Commissioner Rory Christian. He is someone who has a great background. I first met him before he became chair of the Public Service Commission. He's someone who was involved with the clean energy movement in the Environmental Defense Fund. He's someone who has a strong technical background and experience in buildings and in saving money through buildings and doing buildings right through his work with the New York Housing Authority. And he is currently the chair of the New York State Public Service Commission, and by virtue of that is the CEO of the Department of Public Service. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Chair Rory Christian.
Good evening, everyone. Oh man, I love the energy. No pun intended. So, all right, looks like I've gotten you after dinner, so I can take my time. There's no rush to grab any tea or coffee or meal or anything, so I can keep you here all night. But no, I really do appreciate, thank you, Bill, thank you, John. I want to thank you for having me here tonight. I've been attending these events for a very long time, but never as a keynote, so I really appreciate you providing me with the honor to do that tonight and speak with this group. As mentioned, I am the chair of the Public Service Commission in New York State and the CEO of the Department of Public Service. And just looking at the slides Bill shared, I feel like I want to throw out my entire speech because I don't think I can add any more beyond what he has shared. I'm sure you all know about the CLCPA. I'm sure you all know about the IRA. I'm sure you all know about the need behind the work that we're doing. But instead of doing that, what I think I'll do, I want to talk about expectations a little bit. I want to talk about how they're changing and how we think about them. And I want to use that as a frame for talking about the work that we're doing here. So I know amongst my friends and family, when I think about expectations, it's usually realistic or unrealistic. It's pretty binary. It's fairly black and white. And I'm pretty sure, seeing some nodding heads, you probably all feel the same way as well. Now, when I think about what an expectation is, at its core, it's a strong belief. It's an assumption that some event or action is going to happen a certain way. And the thing about these things, expectations, they're entirely dependent on our experiences, what we've seen in the past, how we've reacted to them, what we expect. But they're kind of unpredictable. As much as you might expect something to happen, events beyond your control may easily prevent it from. Now, I think about a collective expectation we all share, and that's an easy one. The sun will rise and set. In fact, I just saw it a few minutes ago. It's beautiful. The sun setting, not rising, just to be clear. We see it every day. We're used to it. It's part of our lived experience. So that's a natural, realistic expectation for us all to have. But when getting to work in the morning, it's also perfectly realistic to think you're going to get there on time. A flat tire, burnt out engine, missed connection could completely change what that expectation is in a matter of moments. So show of hands, I'd love to ask you guys a couple questions. I'm going to do a little bit of audience participation. Bill's inspired me a bit. I want to also talk a little bit about unrealistic expectations. I want to ask a question. How many here have bought a lotto ticket? Show of hands. All right. Okay, this is good. So you thought you were going to win, right? Okay. I did too. It hasn't happened yet. And that's probably why we keep buying. But despite the fact that we know the odds are against us, we still make that decision when we do. Or if you haven't, that's great, that's fine. But everyone who buys a lotto ticket knows that winning is not the likely outcome. But the lotto continues on, and people do win. And this is a collective expectation that we all have, that we all will win, gets defied on a regular basis. The lotto does nothing to make our expectations realistic. It's unrealistic to think about it that way. So I think about that, realistic and unrealistic, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not the right way to frame expectations. Maybe we should think about everything as aspirational, because at the end of the day, that's what they are. All our expectations are aspirational. We can only hope that they become realistic. And the thing about thinking of it this way, you then ask yourself the question, what makes an aspirational expectation a realistic one? Now, an example I like to think about, for those of us who remember or were around, the moon landing. 1960s, JFK committed that by the end of 1969, we'd have a man on the moon. Anybody alive back then would not have believed that to be a realistic expectation. The US space program was plagued with catastrophe, tragedy, and death. And the Russian space program had just put a man in space. So how is it that this upstart nation with a faltering program was able to do the unrealistic? It's through a combination of drive, commitment, passion, and focus. And I think about that a lot because I think about my own life. And I'm sure if you think about your own lives as well, there are plenty of things that you or your family or your friends at some point thought for you was completely unrealistic. Maybe it was getting into a college or a school, a job. Maybe it's your partner, right? You've got a good one at home, I can tell. But the fact is, if you don't even try, if you don't make the effort, nothing's realistic. So doing my job, I have to think about this quite a bit, because what we are doing just 20 years ago, everybody thought it was realistic. Unrealistic. When I started my career at Keyspan Energy, I remember an early conversation with one of my managers, and they explained to me how solar was bad for the system, how it wasn't a good idea. I'd mess everything up, short circuits, transients, et cetera, et cetera. But we know that to not be the case anymore. How many among you remember the conversation where, no, we can't have more than 2% renewable energy on the grid? You all remember that? We're talking about 70% on the grid now in New York State. So we've overcome what was once an unrealistic expectation and made it realistic. And we did that over time. We did that through drive and focus and persistence, working towards a goal, defying the expectations of the time. So I look at everything we're trying to do, everything we at the state with the CLCPA and its various goals, as aspirational. And it's up to the state to put forward a commitment to make it realistic. And in some of the slides you saw before, you saw components of that work that will make those outcomes a reality. Now, that's the work we're doing, but I want to take a moment and talk about customers for a second. Customer expectations. Again, back in my early days at the utility, I remember hearing stories about Hurricane Gloria, how customers were without power for 30 days. Can anybody in this room imagine being without electricity for 30 days? Show of hands. No? Okay, keep your hands down. No. But not too many people. It's rare. We live in a society that's incredibly interconnected, incredibly data-driven, incredibly reliant on the energy systems that we deliver. 30 days without, completely unacceptable. But when I was working in a utility, the way we were trained is the storm would come, the event would happen, the roads would be cleared, and you would be called to respond and help clean up and restore power. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, so I'm guessing I'm not alone in this experience. For those of you from the Buffalo area, show hands, anyone from Buffalo? Okay, great. I know you guys went through some hard times, but I remember being on the phone all through Christmas Eve, Christmas night, and the day after, talking to the utility workers who were on snowmobiles in the middle of the storm, driving out to restore power to some of the isolated areas. That wouldn't have been me 20 years ago. So that's a sign of how we're changing how we need to work to take into account the realistic expectations of our customers. And that's just one of many examples I could cite. But the key is customers expect more. They expect more information. They want to know how their energy is used. I had a smart meter installed recently, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. My air conditioner broke, and I didn't know this for 3 days. And I found out because Con Ed sent me a letter in the mail, well, not a letter in the mail, an email, saying that my energy use was 100% more this week than it was in the prior week. And I stopped, and I got to do my job here, right? It's my house. I look around, I find out the AC is frozen over, the condenser's damaged. But that's something that might have taken me a couple weeks to figure out if I had not gotten that email. And I think about that a lot because that's a sign of where we're going, providing customers with that information to take action, to do the right thing, to be proactive about how they interact with energy. Bless you. We have the tools available today to create an energy future that no one would have thought was realistic just 20 years ago. And again, I think about these things a lot. In part, I get paid to think about these things a lot. But when I think about where we are today, I think about what's happening in our renewable energy rollout. I think about what's happening in our energy efficiency efforts. Again, this is not something that's happened overnight. Many of you in this room, you have been hardened through decades of work in the energy sector, convincing individuals, businesses, companies, industries, that energy efficiency, renewable energy were the right things to do. Many of you, Bill and others, pioneers in this industry, have stuck it out. Again, persistence, drive, focus. You have been making the unrealistic real. and I thank you for that effort. So now I think about, again, where we're going, how we're going to get there, and I think about my role and what we at the Commission are trying to do. Now, I keep bringing up 20 years, and in part because that's how long I've been in the energy space, so that's my frame of reference. But just, that's a relatively short period of time, but a lot has changed. We have cheap and ubiquitous communications technology that was not even conceivable at the start of my time in the energy space. Costs have plummeted. Capabilities have expanded. And these advances now allow us the opportunity to create a grid that our forefathers never could have imagined. A decentralized grid, a resilient grid, a robust grid that can power all, or almost all, of our energy needs going into the distant future. What was once considered far-fetched and unrealistic, it's a reality today, and is becoming more and more so with every passing week. And that's because innovators, individuals who had that focus, drive, and preparation, aspired to make the unrealistic real. And again, innovators like all of you in this room here today. Now, with that decentralized grid, we're poised to integrate ever-increasing quantities of intermittent renewable energy. And last month, this commission, the Public Service Commission, took significant steps to deploy renewable energy at scale, something we've been long doing through the Clean Energy Standard, deploying onshore utility-scale solar and wind, and more recently, offshore wind as well. We've also moved forward with two major renewable energy projects, the Champlain Hudson Power Express and the Clean Path New York projects. These two projects, combined with the work that we have done to date and our offshore wind investments, put New York State at roughly 66% renewable energy generation when these projects are complete. And the goal is 70%, so I appreciate the applause, but wait a couple years. All right, we're almost there. Now, in addition to making sure we have enough renewable energy to meet our needs, a key component to this is making sure we have sufficient transmission and distribution infrastructure. Now, I'm not sure how many of you follow FERC proceedings, but former Chairman Glick recently made a statement highlighting the importance of transmission and reinforcing all the actions that we at the Commission have been taking. And he said something akin to, the weather is going to get really bad, we need more transmission to avoid the worst. I'm paraphrasing, of course, he's far more eloquent than that. But the key thing is everyone recognizes that we need to build out our transmission and distribution infrastructure, because without that, we cannot possibly integrate the level of renewable energy that we will need to meet our goals. And what's beautiful about this is that this is not a mandate that the Commission put forward. This is actually something our elected officials require the Commission to do. Granted, we would have done it anyway, but we appreciate them telling us to take this action. Because what that tells me is that among our elected officials, there's a recognition of the importance of making sure that our infrastructure is invested in and built strong enough to handle the worst that is yet to come. So again, the combination of these investments in renewable energy, in transmission and distribution, and other zero emissions resources put us in striking distance of that 70% by 2030 emissions-free goal. But as I'm sure as you all know, simply building out renewable energy isn't the only piece of the puzzle. We also need to decarbonize our energy use. We need to move away from a reliance on fossil fuels, fuels which currently dominate the transportation sector and the heating sector. Now, electrifying housing, this is an integral component of our state strategy. And this, in combination with a clean energy grid, will have a significant impact on the level of greenhouse gases emitted into our atmosphere. To achieve this, we at the Commission have been aggressively exploring a variety of options. One among them is exploring rates. It's a very hot topic. You guys are going to love it. But we examine everything from the basics of rate design to demand rates and demand response. And our goal is to design rates that will make it advantageous for homeowners to heat their homes with electricity for years to come. Yep. All right. We've also stopped utilities from actively promoting gas expansion, eliminating oil to gas conversion programs and gas marketing efforts, and wiping out customer conversion rebates. We've also taken steps to promote electrification directly through incentives, rebates, and favorable financing. And we're also working with utilities and other stakeholders throughout the state to ensure that whatever tools are needed can be made available to accelerate the adoption of heat pumps. We recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. This will take a variety of initiatives, a variety of efforts, and we must be able to be flexible enough to capture every opportunity as it presents itself. So again, I've talked a lot about the past, but when I think about where we are going, it's hard not to look back and see where we came from. I attended public schools in New York City, and I learned that my public school was burning coal. In fact, little fact, significant number of public schools were burning coal well into the early 2000s. Let that sink in for a second. But one thing I do remember clearly about that time when natural gas was seen as the panacea, the solution to all our woes, I remember the term bridge fuel. I remember that because there was a recognition that it would solve that problem. It would move away from the 6 oil and the 4 oil and the coal that was predominating our heating needs at the time and provide us with a cleaner resource in anticipation of a future where we could do better. So I say here before you all tonight, I'm pretty sure we've crossed that bridge. We're here. And today, we've advanced so many new techniques and technologies and applications, advances made by individuals in this very room. We're ready to take that final leap to a clean energy future. A clean energy future where we can maintain the lifestyle we've all grown accustomed to without significantly degrading the natural environment that we need to survive. So I want to take a moment to thank you all for coming tonight and hearing what I had to say. And I hope that you take this message to heart. Each and every one of you is an innovator. Each and every one of you will make a difference. And your contribution, no matter how small, it adds up. And I remember one of my first events. Part of the reason I was surprised when I looked around, I don't remember this many people being at the first event I attended. So I'm thrilled to see this kind of turnout. And Bill, John, thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you, everyone.